Have you ever felt that what you're going through is impossible? That no matter how hard you try, victory seems so far away? Well, what if I told you there's a story in the Bible that defies all odds, showing us that when you trust in God, the impossible becomes possible? Welcome to Biblical Journey, where we explore powerful biblical stories and teachings that deepen our faith and understanding. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up so you don't miss out on any of our weekly content. Joshua's story begins in one of the darkest times for Israel, a nation in bondage under Egypt's rule. His early life was marked by hardship, but it was also a time where God's providence was evident. Born into the tribe of Ephraim, Joshua witnessed the plagues that shook Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea, and the giving of the Ten Commandments. But Joshua wasn't just another observer, he was a man of action. When the opportunity arose, he didn't hesitate to step up. He wasn't just any follower, he was Moses' right-hand man. His first act of courage was when Moses chose him to lead Israel's army against the Amalekites. While Moses prayed, Joshua led the battle, and Israel won, not because of Joshua's strength, but because of his faith in God. The pivotal moment came when Moses sent 12 spies into Canaan. The land was everything God had promised, flowing with milk and honey. Yet 10 spies spread fear and doubt, telling the people of the giants and obstacles that lay ahead. But Joshua, along with Caleb, stood firm in faith, urging the Israelites not to fear. They trusted in God's promise to give them the land. But the Israelites rebelled. The crowd was so angry they threatened to stone Joshua and Caleb. It was a low point in Israel's history, but God showed up. The glory of the Lord appeared, and a judgment was made. The people who doubted God would never see the promised land, except for Joshua and Caleb. Fast forward 40 years, Israel has wandered the wilderness, and the moment of entering the promised land has arrived. But there's a catch. Moses, the great leader, will not be the one to lead them in. Instead, God chooses Joshua, a man who had been faithful, courageous, and obedient throughout the years. As Moses declared Joshua as the new leader, he spoke the powerful words that would mark Joshua's leadership journey. Be strong and courageous. The Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Joshua had been prepared for this moment. He had learned from Moses, walked beside him, and served as his assistant. But now, the mantle of leadership was on Joshua's shoulders, and the people were ready to follow him. The Jordan River stood between Israel and the Promised Land. At flood stage, it seemed an impossible obstacle. Yet, God gave Joshua specific instructions. Have the priests carry the Ark of the Covenant and step into the water. The moment their feet touched the river, the waters stopped flowing. Israel crossed on dry ground. Another miraculous moment that reminded them that God's promises were always fulfilled. To commemorate this incredible event, Joshua commanded 12 men, one from each tribe, to take stones from the riverbed and set up a memorial. These stones were a lasting reminder that God was faithful to his promises. With their faith strengthened, Israel faced their first major test in the Promised Land, the city of Jericho. The city was heavily fortified, and victory seemed impossible. But God had a plan, one that didn't rely on military strength, but on obedience. Joshua was commanded to march around the city with Israel's army for 6 days. On the 7th day, they marched around 7 times, and then, at the sound of the trumpets and the people's shout, the walls of Jericho collapsed. It was a victory not through human strategy, but through complete obedience to God. Jericho fell, but the true victory was spiritual. Israel had to learn that God's methods are not our methods, and obedience is the key to success. But Joshua's faith would be tested again. After the stunning victory at Jericho, the city of Ai seemed like an easy win. However, when they attacked Ai with a small force, they were routed and forced to retreat. Israel had lost. Joshua, devastated, sought God for answers. God revealed that there was sin in the camp. Someone had disobeyed his command regarding the spoils of Jericho. The guilty man, Achan, was exposed and punished, and once the sin was dealt with, Israel regained God's favor. With obedience restored, Israel went back to Ai, following God's exact instructions, and this time, they were victorious. But Joshua's journey wasn't without its mistakes. One of his greatest failures occurred when the Gibeonites deceived Israel into making a peace treaty. Instead of seeking God's guidance, Joshua relied on his own judgment and was misled. The Gibeonites tricked them by pretending to be from a distant land, and Joshua made a vow to protect them. When the truth came out, Joshua could not break his vow, as it was made before God. Instead of attacking, Joshua honored his word, making the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for Israel. This failure taught Joshua an invaluable lesson. Even great leaders must seek God in every decision, no matter how small it may seem. Joshua's greatest moment of faith came during the battle against the 5 kings of the Amorites. As the battle raged, Joshua realized that nightfall would allow the enemy to escape. In an act of bold faith, he prayed to God to stop the sun, and, incredibly, God responded. The sun stood still over Gibeon, and the moon held its place over the valley. For an entire day, time was suspended, allowing Israel to defeat their enemies. This moment is unparalleled in history and demonstrates the immense power of a leader who places his trust in God without hesitation. With the sun's miraculous standstill, Joshua continued his conquest of Canaan. One by one, the kings and kingdoms fell. Joshua led Israel with a firm belief that victory came not from military might, but from God's provision. His leadership was marked by his unshakable trust in God, and through his obedience, Israel claimed the land promised to their ancestors. After the miraculous standstill of the sun, Joshua's leadership was never more evident. The Israelite army, now emboldened by God's clear intervention, continued to push forward in the conquest of Canaan. With each victory, Joshua showed that trusting in God's promises was not only necessary, but the key to victory. He wasn't just a general leading an army. He was a spiritual leader guiding Israel in obedience to God's commands. As Israel took possession of the land, they continued to face challenges, but with each victory, God showed his faithfulness. It wasn't Joshua's strength that won these battles, but God's power working through him. Joshua's trust in God's timing, his plans, and his methods was unwavering. And through Joshua, the Israelites learned an invaluable lesson. Obedience to God is the true path to success. As the years went on and the conquest neared its completion, Joshua did not just focus on the victories. He also turned his attention to the future of Israel. He made sure that each tribe received their rightful portion of the land. But this wasn't just about territorial division. It was about fulfilling the promises God had made to their ancestors. Joshua's actions were deliberate and precise. He followed God's instructions on how to divide the land, ensuring justice and fairness. This process of distributing the land and settling the tribes was not only a fulfillment of God's promises, but also a preparation for a new chapter in Israel's history. It marked the transition from a people in the wilderness to a people in possession of their promised inheritance. As Joshua grew older, he knew that his time on earth was coming to an end. His work was far from over, but he had led Israel through incredible trials and triumphs. Before he died, Joshua called the leaders and elders of Israel together for a final speech. Standing before them, he reminded them of God's faithfulness and challenged them to remain true to the covenant. He urged them not to turn away from God, but to obey his commands and serve him faithfully. Joshua's parting words to Israel were stirring. "Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." In these words, Joshua set an example of unwavering faith. He didn't just lead by actions, but by conviction. His faith wasn't based on circumstances, nor was it tied to how many battles he had won. It was grounded in the trust that God would fulfill his promises no matter what. His final declaration was not just a personal commitment, it was a challenge to the entire nation. It was a call to decide who they would serve, a reminder that obedience to God was the path to blessing. Joshua's story teaches us powerful lessons about leadership, obedience, and trust in God. Whether we face impossible situations or the promise of victory, our response must be faith and obedience. Just as Joshua said, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Let us make that same declaration today. If you found this video powerful, don't forget to like it and share it with others who need to hear the message. Subscribe to Biblical Journey for more stories like this, and make sure you hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest content. Also, I want to hear from you. In the comments, tell me, what does Joshua's declaration, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," mean to you? Let's discuss it together. And remember, no matter how impossible things may seem, trust in God's promises, and He will lead you through. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay strong in faith and always walk with God.